So when the pandemic hit, a lot of people had to make a lot of adjustments. And one adjustment that I had to make was working from home. But like, to be honest, I didn't really need to, because I was already working from home from another company, and I'd already been working from home for a year. And then like when I moved to this other company, they had me working in the office, but then the pandemic hit and I went back to working from home anyway. So it wasn't much of a transition work wise, but life wise was kind of crazy. I remember like just thinking everything has to be clean now. Everything has to be clean. Like no matter what I touch, everything, I have to keep track of what I touch mentally, so then I can remember to like spray stuff down, wipe stuff down, clean my hands endlessly. And, things just changed. And I hadn't seen my family in so long, and like, I wanted to go home, but flying home, it was cheap, but also it was scary, because we didn't know anything about the virus, and it was just, it hit everyone and it went crazy. And tickets were cheap, but they were, the whole thing was scary. So that was the adjustment for me, was just preparing for all of the craziness, wearing masks, like reading about it. It was it was intense. There was no, there was nothing. There was like no, there was no medicine or vaccines or anything. It was just all like, everyone was just afraid. And, a lot of crazy stuff happened, in that time. I was at this job, and this job didn't end up, like, I was good for most of the pandemic, but then, at this job, I just was not happy, and I was, afraid of the virus, the coronavirus. And then I was afraid of, like, am I going to be able to see my parents? And a lot of things were going on at that time. And to be honest, I still, have a lot of fears about stuff. I still wonder about things, even though I'm vaccinated and everything. And I think like the things that I learned, were just really keeping track of cleanliness. Like, what did I touch? Who am I around? Those are things that really like made me aware of the, even more aware of like things around me. And through that, I had become a lot more secluded from everybody. I created, like, I used to eat out a lot, and because of the pandemic, I started cooking from home. And I used to go to the dog park a lot. Instead of going to the dog park, me and my dog would go on giant walks. So making those two changes from cooking for myself and going on giant walks, like, I got healthier. I felt better. I was able to do things and think clearer. Also, got rid of some other bad habits that, made huge differences for me. And a lot of things changed because of those because of the three things that I really made adjustments on. So I do have, like, in some regards, I'm thankful that the world went through the pandemic, but at the same time, it's like, I'll get into it, but it is not, it is not a good thing. Anyway, so for me, it was like, not a huge change. There was some change. The big changes, like I said, were just changes to my diet, changes to exercise, and the way the way I like get my dog out, and those kinds of things. And then, but my job, like, I know they were frustrated because of the pandemic stuff, and I ended up not wanting to. I ended up not wanting to have to deal with that job, so I ended up leaving that job, and I just figured out that like I need to do something for myself finally. I need to, like, all this time I had been building apps for other people. I had been working on stuff like other people's companies and making them much more money, and a lot of times it was because of me. It was because of my ideas and my work and stuff like that. So because of all that stuff, I had really and because of those feelings, I decided to get rid of that that company, and I went off and now I'm pretty much on my own. So I'm doing my own company. I have contracts that I work with. I am working with different companies. They just bring me on as a consultant to do specific things. I help them, like, set up their software and get things set up, and I design stuff and all that, like a digital handyman. I just do so much work, right? It's for different various people, but in the end, I'm in control. I'm not part of their company. They're still paying me. In fact, they're paying me a lot better, and I have control over who I work with. I have control over how we work. I can write contracts now and stuff like that. So during the pandemic, I feel like I became self-empowered. I became much more empowered through myself. I have more confidence. I just feel a lot better. But then there's some aspects that were really dark. So recently I flew back home, and back home in New Mexico, where my parents are from, the coronavirus went crazy, and like in that town that they live in, and a lot of my family members passed on, and not all from the coronavirus, but there was a good number of them from the coronavirus. And I think about those people, and it's like some of them were, they were bound, because they were just so unhealthy and stuff like that. They were not going to survive very long anyway. But I feel like the coronavirus sped things up for them. And they don't have resources. They don't have the same resources and stuff like that. So I was always thinking about, when I went back, I was like, man, I really am like in a better spot. I really am in a good spot with myself and with like my work and my life and stuff like that. And, but it really gave me something to contrast against. So when I went back home, I remember like I wanted to go see my nephew's grave because, I never got a chance to fly back because the coronavirus hit. I didn't have, like when my first nephew died, I didn't have money to fly back. And things were just not, I was in the right place because I had money, but like I didn't have the time because I had just started another job, and it's like you can't just start a job and instantly go on vacation. And it was rough. I was just trying to figure it all out, and I just couldn't make it. So like this time when I went back home, I went to go look at their grave and just reminisce and just see where they're at, see their final resting place and stuff like that, and get the story. And so my brother went with me, and he was telling me, and like I went back just to see my nephews, but when I went back, there were like so many graves. And my brother went through, and I saw people that I grew up with, like different graves of different people. And my brother went one by one telling me exactly how those people died. My brother's like, this one died from the coronavirus. This one died from, violence. It was always like the same three things. It was either they died from a meth overdose, and it was always meth, or they died from drinking. I mean, actually, it's four things. So meth, drinking, the alcohol, coronavirus, or violence. Those were like the four things. So drugs, alcohol, violence, the coronavirus. Those were like the fate of all of those people. And I thought about it, and I'm just like, it's just so, it was just tragic to see all those graves and see all those people, and it was just, it was rough. And then my brother drove me around, and I was asking about different people. I'm like, well, what about that guy? What happened to him? And my brother's like, oh, he got killed in this and this, and like these people were arguing and they got pulled guns, and then my mom, she was telling me about how the people next door cooking meth, and it's just like everywhere is just, when you watch Breaking Bad, you think that's like a movie and it's not really a real thing, but it really is. It really is like that out there. There are a lot of people, and meth has hit them pretty hard. And like I think about, like where I would have been if I had never gone off on my own, if I had never gone into these strange lands, right? And I had never gone off and cultivated myself and produced the goods that I needed, and built, a home in the desert, and got accepted by the people, in the places that I was accepted into, and like, and learned the language, pretty much learned how to, how to develop and how to, make things. And basically now I'm set up I have my own little business that I'm running. I have things set up. I'm able to play Minecraft freely. I'm able to do all these things, and I still feel unfulfilled on some levels. And I think that's kind of crazy, because those people will never know, like, they'll never know what that is, or they'll never know that that was even an option. So the coronavirus and the pandemic and stuff like that really gave me a chance to look at and spend some time to look at myself and look at the people and be hyper aware of things around me. It really made me pay attention to stuff around me. It was like looking at my hands, I had to make sure that they were clean, and looking at the stuff in my house, I had to make sure that everything was spotless, and keeping track of who I was around, and going to get tests and getting Q-tips shoved up my nose and down my throat. Like, it was just crazy, to say the least. But I learned a lot. I learned a lot from this whole situation. And I always think, like, I shouldn't dwell on certain things, or I shouldn't I shouldn't think too deeply about certain things, just because it's like, like with drugs and stuff like that, those people, they were the ones that put themselves in that situation. I put myself in this situation. And I'm glad I did. I'm glad I took chances. but I still think that I'm just like, I'm nowhere near my goal. Like, my goal is so far, and I'm working towards that, and it feels like I'm in the desert, right? And I'm heading towards, and hopefully, and then I get to another place, and it's not paradise yet, and I'm still working and like making my way through the grime and the dirt and the grit, and I'm making my way through murky waters, and then and then I get into a swamp and it's like, just an endless like journey. But the other thing I've heard is that, like, it's like if you focus just on your destination, you miss the journey, you miss like the things that happen during that journey. And I'm trying to be more hyper aware of that, of like making sure that like the journey that I'm on, that I'm paying attention, and that I am, doing what I can to make sure that, I don't miss out on any lessons, or because you only get one chance to go on this journey and then it's over, right? And I thought about that too. Like, what does it mean, like, when it's over? And that's not really, like, people focus so much on death. Like, they just think about death. They think about, oh, well, all this is going to happen before I die. And it's like, yeah, dying is the easy way out. Living is what's hard. Living and pain and like making it through things and like putting yourself through situations and coming out as a better person, that's what's hard. People, like, I always think about those people that, were on meth and stuff like that. They wanted the easy McDonald's lunch, way out of like the situation they're in, instead of working and, learning new trade skills and figuring out ways to get themselves out. And then I think, like, well, what if that is just something, well, what if there really are just limits to people, like, what if they're not able to, what if they just don't have the intellect to do it? And I'll never know the answer to that, because I'll never know those people. I'll never know, what's going on in their minds. I'll never know their perspective. I'll never know the story of them. And what I learned too is that, like, everything that happens to you or whatever is all you. Like, people, and I thought about all these people that died, and it's like, like a friend I had, growing up, he was pretty wild. I remember him punching teachers and getting in fights, but he always had my back. Me and him were such good friends, and like, me and him, like, if someone, if we got in fights and stuff, we had each other's backs. And and we were really good friends, but then he died from, it was pretty obvious what he died from. He died from gang violence. And I think about that kind of stuff, and it's like, I know that he wasn't, I think that he could have, done what I did. Like, he could have taken the time to learn something and become, and take a different path. But then I think, like, if I was in his situation, would I have done the same thing? And I don't know, like, the depth of his, maybe he learned some lessons that I'll never know because of the path he took. And that's fine. But at the end of the day, it's like, who's to say that, that my path is the better path? My path of, like, working and, learning software and becoming, what is morally correct versus, taking his path, which is, taking advantage of people and manipulating stuff and, getting into violence and not being patient and taking huge risks and winning and, not winning, but like taking money from people and stuff like that, and like stealing and all those things that are just bad. It's like, who's to say that there aren't some powerful lessons in that? And I think about that. It's like, we're all on our own path. We all have our own things that we have to get through. And I don't know that like one or the other is better anymore. I don't know that, I don't know that his path, but I do know that that was his path. And I know that my path is much different. And I guess I just don't find thrill in like exploiting people or manipulating things or, taking advantage of, different situations and stuff like that. So that was my pandemic. Those are some of the themes that I felt throughout most of the pandemic and spending all this time by myself, was that I don't think that there was, I don't know. Now, like, I feel like the more I learn, the less I know. Or the more I realize that the less I know, because at the end of the day, you'll never know the other person's perspective. You only know your own. All things that you learn, all the people that you come to know and love, all those feelings, they're all just generated by you and your brain and your chemicals and, like the stuff that's happening in you. When you see somebody that you really love and you really, want them in your life or whatever, whether that's like, family or, or somebody that you have a crush on or whatever, you don't want them as a person. What you want is the feelings they give you. And at the end of the day, I'll never know the feelings that those people had. I'll never know, where their place in the universe, what their perspective looks like from that spot. I'll never know, but we all have our spot in the stars. We're all shooting for the moon. Our own moons. But that was my perspective of like the pandemic, and I thought it was interesting. So I got to shout out whoever like in the last video asked for this this subject, because it was a really good one. But I'll definitely I appreciate it. And if you guys have any other ideas for any other topics that you want me to cover, I'll take a look at it, and if I feel it, I'll do it. Hope you guys have a good rest of your pandemic. Peace out.